Before we begin, let me set the context for this conversation. I'm sitting down with Miguel from Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. And if you haven't heard of him or Aeon Byte, you most definitely need to go over and check out all his work. The conversation begins with Gnosis. Early on, Miguel says, I still don't even know what Gnosticism is. And that's where this whole conversation really starts. He talks about how you don't choose these things, they choose you. And how a series of synchronicities and experiences led him into this work, and eventually into creating Aeon Byte. We talk about Gnosis, and Miguel says it's experiential. At one point, he puts it very plainly. Gnosis is just going home. That idea comes up again and again as we talk. From there, we get into Archons and Abraxas and why the language around them stays ambiguous in Gnostic texts. Miguel talks about simulations, about being trapped inside a coded world, and why stories like The Matrix and the works of the great Gnostic heretic Philip K. Dick keep returning to these ideas over and over again. Later, we talk about Miguel's new book, The Occult Elvis. Miguel explains how the book came to him, how quickly it was written, and how Elvis was a mystic and a magician, his experiences, and how those things showed up within Elvis's life. Miguel talks about myth in personal terms. He says, write your own gospel, live your own myth, and connects that idea to finding your way, following what calls you, and understanding your place within the world. And this is MagusintheMedia. We look at myth, magic, philosophy, and meaning within the stories that we love. Now, let's get into it. Welcome back to MagusintheMedia. I am here today with one of my favorite podcasters slash radio show hosts slash one of the greatest Gnostic heretics out there in this day and age. He's a brilliant man. He is Miguel Connor of Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. Right away, I'll state, anyone who hasn't heard of him, please go over and check out all of his work. He puts it on all of the things. He's been doing it for such a long time, and he is one of the GOATs in this space. So please and thank you. Welcome, Miguel, to MagusintheMedia. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on, and thanks kindly for the words.
Yeah, of course. I just so everybody knows, Miguel has been one of my favorite people that to listen to since in the early days of his doing Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio and calling forth the great Gnostic Abraxas. He did just come out with an amazing book that we're going to talk about Elvis Presley and his magic and occultism, which is right up our alley here. But what I want to first kind of get into, since I've got you in front of me, is talk about how did you stumble down the rabbit hole to get yourself into, as you put it, and as I, since you haven't copywrote the term, came into the desert of the real. Let's hear it there, Miguel.
Well, there's many things, including the book. You don't choose them. They choose you. A force will call upon you, flow through you, and that's where you go. So, like many things in life, whether my pursuit of Gnosticism or, again, the Elvis book, a series of synchronicities, visions, calls, led me down that rabbit hole, and it's never an easy journey because the gods or the muses or your gut, whatever you want to call it, are very demanding. But they have a mission. We all have a mission. It's all about listening. And we must follow it. As I tell people, you can when you are chosen, whatever your mission is, no mission is more important or less important than the other one. You have two choices. You can either have pain or less pain, and that's just the way it works. We see it in all the stories. It's nothing new or different. So I guess my less pain was going down the path of Gnosticism.
Beautiful. Then the true question is, then what does that mean to you? What does Gnosticism mean to you, Miguel?
I still don't know. Isn't that funny? No, well, I don't. I mean, it's... we used to compare Gnosticism to jazz when I was in the old PHP forums and so forth. Dawn of the social media, and I think it makes more sense. It's what it is a form of a jazz, or I forgot who said it. Jimi Hendrix said the blues. The blues is easy to understand but hard to feel. So Gnosticism, I think, is that, and really any religion. You can study Buddhism all you want, Christianity, but until you have the experience. And Gnosticism is very experiential beyond all the, Lovecraftian edgelord, demiurge, archons, and all that. It is about having an experience, a shamanistic experience of life. So, yeah, it's not easy to describe. Let's put it that way.
That's the most humble answer I think I could ever get from anybody. It seems like most people don't maybe know, but there are many different forms of Gnosticism, right?
That is true. That is true. But there's many there's many different forms of Christianity, right? 30,000
Yes.
30,000 denominations just in the USA. Buddhism is very varied. So is Hinduism. So that's normal. So when you're trying to define these movements, you're not going to get a perfect box. It's the old saying that says all systems are likely wrong, but some are useful. Gnosticism is useful, but again, it's a very varied, and of course, being very anarchistic, individualistic. During the time that it really came to being in the early Christian days, it split off into all these lodges, and they all have different variations. I mean, there is useful things, definition boxes about Gnosticism you can use. We are here trapped in a simulation. We've forgotten our celestial origins. We are worshiping the wrong gods, but within each one of us, there is a shard of infinity of the true God. They called it the divine spark. And through some sort of awakening, usually stimulated by a Gnostic revealer, we can realize that we are higher than these beings that have trapped us in this simulation, and we can make contact with this supreme consciousness through various rituals and so forth. So you can use that, and of course, there's a million other variations and features. The Gnostics were very much into the divine feminine, a belief in reincarnation, deconstruction of texts, a heavy allegory, and so many other little features. So, but I think you can define Gnosticism intellectually, and yes, there was a lot of groups, not in ancient times, but throughout history, the Cathars, Kabbalists, maybe even the Rosicrucians, who Persian iterations like the Mazdakites and so forth. You can see this Gnostic idea. And probably because Gnosticism isn't a religion, it's like shamanism or exorcism. There's no church of shamanism, is there? There's no church of exorcism. These are
Right.
spiritual modalities or metaphysical orientations that attach themselves to other religions if the religion or the tribe or the village finds them useful. Not every religion will want a shamanistic path or feature. Not every religion will want a exorcist in their religion, and not every religion, especially Gnosticism, because it's been so persecuted, will want that. So when you see it that way, it's easier to understand, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's actually quite fascinating. So then my real question is, then Gnosis seems to be something that is stemming from Gnosticism, correctly? That Gnosis, to you, does that mean direct experience?
Yeah, Gnosis is a very important feature with Gnosticism. And ironically, it's not even exclusive to Gnosticism. Other traditions in those days, especially in ancient Alexandria, really loved this spiritual tech, including Neoplatonists, mystic Jews, and so forth. And that is the idea that it is our birthright that we can have a direct experience with higher worlds. We can travel to those worlds and experience them personally, in person, if you would. And that certainly is an important feature. And of course, it does always include self-knowledge, because as Elaine Pagel said in her book, The Gnostic Gospels, to know ourselves is to know God. We have this divine spark within us. To access us, we can access the mind of God and be directly connected to God, or whatever you want to call it, the monad, the supreme consciousness, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, nice. That's fascinating. Yeah, Ellen Pagel's work is quite brilliant. Everyone out there should definitely. She's one of the forefront writers on Gnosticism. So that's amazing. So for you, would you state that you kind of had your own level of gnosis, and that's what led you into then creating Aeon Byte?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, yeah, of course I had gnosis. We've all had gnosis. We've all had, as Morpheus told Neo in the Matrix, you know there's something wrong with the world, but you don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter driving you mad. As somebody wisely once said, gnosis is not the result, it's what brings the results. Neo's gnosis started at the beginning of the movie when he's just uncomfortable and depressed and he's rebelling against the system, and then it goes through stages. Then there's the meeting Morpheus, the red pill. It didn't end with the red pill. Then there's the adventure of or the great saga fighting the Archons, the Agents, and the Matrix. So Gnosis is a continuation. It is a process, just like any knowledge, except it's divine knowledge. It's an education, and it is a journey. And the climax again is contact and unification with the supreme mind. Somebody once asked me, what is gnosis? I said, oh, gnosis is just going home. That's it. Wherever your home is, maybe it's your parents' house, maybe it's in heaven, I don't know, but it's going home and getting home.
That's actually a great answer, because it both is concrete and abstract. And I think sometimes in the communities of the Gnostic or the occult or the esoteric mythological, we seem too much into the symbolic and abstraction, when really going home is just that, heading home and really falling into the morphogenic fields around you that you can kind of tap into, that can lead you to a direct experience of things.
Yeah, we all know it in our gut. That's it. I mean, as my friend Kevin says, 20% of our neurons are in our gut and some in our heart.
Yes,
That's where the real knowledge is. And if we follow it, we know where it is. We don't need our minds to know where home is and what the process is and what it's going to feel like, because that's where we came from.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that is actually true in your gut. You do have gray matter, a large portion of gray matter in the gut, just like in the brain. And there's that gut-brain axis. So that's a nice little gut science there from Miguel Connor himself. Nice.
Yeah, even more. There was an individual who said gnosis is the knowledge of the heart. And people used to, oh, that's such a new age thing. But science has told us, yes, we also have neurons in the heart. And the Egyptians, Gnosticism is a Egyptian religion. It's important to know. And the Egyptians, why were they saving the heart? They thought that's where the brain was. They probably knew that's where the real information was that should be stored.
Oh, that's nice. Now let's go. I want to dig deeper into, since I got you here on Aeon Byte itself, what was then for you the spark to finally create Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio?
Probably my interest in it. Once I became interested in it a long time ago and started studying it and so forth, I didn't know much about it, and I was reading the books, and I wanted to get the takes of people who were experts. Again, Elaine Pagels, translators of the Nag Hammadi library, that treasure trove of 55 Gnostic texts, or mostly Gnostic texts. And so I decided the best thing was to contact them directly and ask them questions. That's what we used to do 20 years ago, right? Call them, email them, all that. Yeah, I loved your work and this. I have questions. But then I decided, well, as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you get it, you got to give it away. Or you could say, if you have gnosis, it's not gnosis until you give it away. It has to be expressed. It has to be shared. You're not there to save anybody, convert somebody, but help somebody wake up. I think that's the goal. We can't wake others up, but we can provide them with the means if they so choose to. So I said, well, yeah, I'm going to ask them these questions. Why don't I record them? This is before the podcast era. And I said, at least I'll have this stored and I'll put it on my website and it could be valuable for somebody. And somehow I kept calling these scholars, again, the translators of the Nag Hammadi Library, Bart Ehrman, Elaine Pagels, and they kept agreeing. And I kept doing these chats and recording them. And then I called it Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis back then. And I just kept doing it. I wasn't doing it regularly. It was sort of whenever I could. And it just kept growing. And eventually I changed it to Aeon Byte. And eventually in 2018, I went full time with the podcast. And through that experience, I just kept learning about Gnosticism. Now, there was also another one. Again, it's never as simple as that. I talked about visions and synchronicities and so forth. During that early period, I was going back home to Portugal, and my uncle was the head of a church called Santo Daime. It's an Brazilian Amazonian mystic Christian sect that uses ayahuasca. And he invited me to do some rituals. He built a church next to his house. I was like, okay, I'm over here. I'll just go. And woo, I did a few of these rituals, but there was one ritual. It was an intense ritual with like 50 people. It was like 8 hours long, and I left my body. I did an astral flight that never happened before. And I was at the edge of the universe, and suddenly this being, I couldn't describe it. It was pure darkness, darker than dark. It was like all the dark matter in the universe, like noticed me and went into one place and was just looking at me curiously regarding me. And this word came out of me, Abraxas. You are Abraxas. And I thought this being was going to swallow me. And it probably was, because my aunt next door, she was sleeping and she had a broken leg. She woke up and went like, Miguel is too far off. How would she know? Because we're doing the ceremony, we're doing the dancing and the sitting and all that. How would she know that this was happening to me? But she got on her wheelchair and went around the house into the church and disrupted the ritual and screamed at my uncle, Miguel is too far off into the universe. Stop it. And I was there in a trance, and my uncle shook me, and suddenly I'm with this being called Abraxas, and I go right into my body. So there's proof something was off, that there was it was valid to an extent. But since that Abraxas experience, I felt this was also part of my journey to understand Abraxas and the Gnostic mysteries and so forth. And there are a million other syncs, but those are the two big ones, podcasts and Abraxas.
Nice. Well, then I think a lot of people don't know, and there's a lot of more conspiratorial misunderstandings on the term and the egregore Abraxas. Can you give us a nice little lowdown on said chicken-headed snake god?
Yeah. Well, it's a hard one, but I think part of why it's so enigmatic and fascinating is like Baphomet. There's not that much information. So as we humans do, we don't like ambiguity. You see it today in the conspiracy world. We will fill in the blanks like hell. And that's what happens with Abraxas. Same with Baphomet. There's not much about Baphomet out there. So Abraxas, it's ambiguous how the church fathers and the Gnostics wrote about him and how they expressed him, but he is a figure that is prevalent in a lot of Gnostic gems and amulets. We have a historical sighting with somebody in London in like 3rd, 4th century during a pandemic, was praying to Abraxas to help him with the pandemic. We have other reports where people would use the gem not because they wanted Abraxas around, but because they kept him away. This giant force that is bigger than anything in the universe, still small compared to the ultimate consciousness, but this guy is bigger than Yahweh or any of these other gods. They wanted to keep him away because if he saw you, he would crush you like me, not just your body, but your soul. So we have that in gems, but in writings, again, it's always ambiguous. He's mentioned in magical incantation in the Gnostics. Some said he was the supreme intelligence. Other reports say, no, he's the head Archon. He's the biggest of this Gnostic sage called Basilides divided the universe in 365 dimensions. Each one has a supreme god. Yahweh's at the bottom, so think how more powerful these other 363 are, and Abraxas at the top. So it just gets very ambiguous, and he appears in history again through in grimoires and writings. We do know for a fact that the Knights Templar use the seal of Abraxas to protect their treasures, which is very telling, and so forth. So that's really all I can say. I mean, Jung wrote a lot about Abraxas in his Red Book and his Black Books, and people thought he was talking about Abraxas in a positive way, but now it's come to say that no, he saw Abraxas as a very negative being, the force of karma or oppression in this universe, the totality of this universe, which always equates to keeping us asleep or keeping us in one place. So that, in a nutshell, is our friend Abraxas.
That was great. Yeah, that was a beautiful explanation of that. And then it seems through my listening of you through time, you kind of then processed and had a different understanding of Abraxas where you kind of transcended using that term. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, he was like my patron. I used to call myself Abraxas. Again, this is pre-podcast days when people didn't give their identity online. We all had usernames. It was kind of a better time. So mine was Abraxas. If I made friends on the internet, oh, by the way, my real name's Miguel Connor. You want to talk on messaging, but that was it. And he was my patron. And then somebody mentioned that it was not a good idea, that it was a negative thing. So then I dropped it like 2020. Now I'm sort of coming back because I realize, sometimes you got to surrender to these baddies, whether it's Saturn or Yahweh or Abraxas. I mean, we gotta coexist in this universe. Yeah, you're all powerful. You are supreme, omniscient, omnipotent, and all that. But I tell good jokes, so we can exist in the same universe and work with each other. Because in the end, if we're in this universe, all of us have some sort of learning or karma or something to do, and we all have a function. Without bees, the earth dies. Without grass, everybody's important. So I've kind of brought them back.
Yeah, nice. I've noticed that. I also see that with your work now, you're bringing back. So everyone knows, Miguel Connor is one of the greatest, like the podcast that he created in the beginning. You used to have basically openings of all the different brilliant Gnostic style scripts and videos and movies clips that you'd come before your podcast, which I always loved listening to. And then you kind of stopped doing that, but now you're doing a series now that you're bringing that back. Is that correct?
Yeah, slowly and gradually. Yeah, I used to do these long introductions with music, and I would put in Gnostic themed movies, and I would recite poetry or bring up ideas and all that. So that was sort of my shtick, my unique thing that I brought to the world. Yes, I sort of had to abandon it because years fighting YouTube's algorithms and podcasts, I would get dinged because of copyright or this or that, or I would use something that was too lewd because I'd quote a movie where something says profanity or something sexual. And I just got tired. I said, I'm just going to go live and just do something more normal because, again, it's after 10 years of doing it or 5 years of doing it, it just got too much. Now that I'm doing a reboot and I'm putting more stuff behind a paywall, I'm sort of bringing back those intros, but kind of behind the paywall. So YouTube and those other Archons will leave me alone. So it's a game we play, man.
It is a game we play. Nice. Well, then we've used this term a few times. I know how I use it through my shows and different things like that. I'd love to hear your take on what is the definition for Archon and who are they?
Well, as another wise person once said, I've never met an Archon, but I feel their effects every day. So that's because I guess I did meet the Archon, the head Archon Abraxas in my ayahuasca vision. And I've seen, specters and Wetiko and other shit in my time. But the Archons, they're sort of the villains, if you would, in the Gnostic saga. The The term means prince or ruler in Greek, and they are the ones who control our universe. They are the controllers of fate and time, the structure of reality. They're not very bright. They're more like algorithms, hungry algorithms, because as the Gnostics said, the Gnostics never said the world was an illusion. They said it was a simulation. It was coded to keep us trapped, to not let us see the truth. And it's very glitchy. That's the other thing. And they're like, it sucks. Whoever built this video game needs to go back. And it was the Archons, these stellar wardens or ranchers that keep us trapped. And why do they keep us trapped? Because we are dinner. We're the main course. They feed off of our divine spark, and they need our divine spark to keep the universe going, to keep where they live, their structure, their operating system going. So they have to keep us trapped. So we don't try to, you might say, escape, if you would. And at the top of the Archons, you have the head Archon. Again, one Gnostic sage said it was Abraxas, but the others called him Yaldabaoth, or the Demiurge, as he's often known today. And they often equated him to our friend Yahweh from the Hebrew Bible, although some equated him to Kronos or Osiris. Any of the head gods the Gnostics saw as, some said, well, you're not evil, but you're not a very good CEO. We need better management in this universe. So that's who the Archons saw. And it was probably very prevalent in ancient times because the Gnostics were gaga over Paul. Now, not the Paul we know, and with our Sunday school classes and the way the Bible, the New Testament has been redacted, but Paul always talks about this being called Christ coming to this world. He's an alien being, very much like the Gnostics saw Jesus and others. And he's fighting, trying to break the yoke of the powers and principalities, the rulers of this age, the Archons of this age. Now, when you read it, you go, well, is he talking about, he's talking about the Romans, right? But when you start reading it again, you realize, whoa, he's talking about some cosmic beings. And, he doesn't even mention Satan, this world. Even when he talks about the God of this world, you go, is he talking about the Demiurge? Or so this was actually pretty prevalent in ancient times, the idea, and you can go to the Book of Enoch and other sources, that whoever was running the universe had either built a very shitty construct or had usurped this world from the higher God, and now the higher God needed to find a way to defeat these Nephilim or Watchers or Archons or whatever you want to call them, Anunnaki. And why? Because, again, they had stolen us from the high God, and we were their meal. We were trapped in this prison and fed on, and we needed to escape. And again, look at the movie The Matrix. Humans are trapped because the Matrix needs our electricity to survive during the nuclear holocaust. So that, in short, is who the Archons are.
Nice. That's again a great description. So what do you feel about, so that you have the Gnostics who a large part believe that the material universe and the body are trapping light within it, and we through Gnosis have to lead ourselves out of this into back the pleroma, or out, back to the celestial spheres. But then you get certain Neoplatonic thinkers like, say, Iamblichus, who states, no, actually we need the material body so we can have this anagogic, or the descent to the divine, but we need the divine into our body. And so I think that there's this almost this like philosophical difference in those two ways of thinking, the Anglican term of theurgy, or the more Gnostic, certain of these Gnostic sects thinking, no, we need to bust out of this prison. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, within the Gnostic communities, there was a varied viewpoints, for sure. I mean, there's a saying: if you have two Gnostics in a room agreeing on something, one of them is a false Gnostic, because they didn't agree, and they broke off in little lodges throughout Alexandria and the rest of the Roman Empire, because everything was on the table to Gnosticism. Reality is very fluid. and you often need to tweak the myth or the experience so you can have that deeper understanding. So yeah, some Gnostics like the Sethians were more like, yeah, this is a prison planet and we've been duped, we're trapped, we need to get out of this demented, what did Philip K. Dick call the demiurge, this dangerous magician, we need to get out. Others were a lot softer, like, no, this is more of a cosmic gym, we come here to learn. Yeah, it's tough, but even the demiurge is ignorant, and even he is going through some lessons, so it'll be fine. And then there was all these other spectrums. I mean, and that's fine. You can do that because it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we have to wake up. We have to find our celestial home, and we have to find ways to become individuated and whole and help others so they can awaken to their potential and their own journey. So it didn't matter how bad you want to see it. Your mileage may vary. The matter is the mission in front of us.
Nice. And that mission is to find your way home through
Wake
Gnosis.
up, know thyself, wake up, and yeah, find your way home. And always help others too, because again, it's not Gnosis unless you give it away. We are humans. We are empathetic. We are tribal in our own way, and we want everybody to awaken and go home and break the chain of suffering and reincarnation, which is so odious.
Yeah. Odious, great word. Odium. Maynard James Keenan in one of his A Perfect Circle songs, Feathers, uses that term odium, and everyone should go listen to it. Anyway, that's my A Perfect Circle talk for the moment.
We have a Tool fan in the house. Oh,
yeah,
my God.
we do. Can't help it. So then the move into, you brought up the name Philip K. Dick. And I think he is one of the largest Gnostic heretics, but also a warning against not having a set practice and an embodiment and how the mind kind of can do some things, but also brilliant things at the same time. Why is Philip K. Dick? I know that I love him, and I've done a lot of work on reading all his stuff, but tell the audience, why is Philip K. Dick such a master heretic in the Gnostic spheres?
Well, I mean, he's a master just in itself. So much of our science fiction today is influenced by those who were influenced by Philip K. Dick, by fans of Philip K. Dick. You can look at shows like Severance, Silo, and so many others. They directly tap into Philip K. Dick for sure. He's one of the certainly godfathers of cyberpunk and science fiction itself, speculative science fiction. I mean, once Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was adapted to Blade Runner, and then we had Total Recall, Minority Report, so many of his other movies. I mean, it changed literature, it changed philosophy, it changed the way people saw the world. We still use his terms and even his worldview. And Philip K. Dick was extremely influenced by Gnosticism, not just reading it, but he had certain Gnostic visions that made him align with Gnosticism. In fact, there was a time when he thought he was the Apostle Thomas, who's a very important apostle for the Gnostics, and he was. We lived in a hologram. Time had stopped when the Romans destroyed the temple in 70 A.D., and the empire had put this hologram, and the empire changed, run by the Archons and the Demiurge, and it changes throughout time. It may appear as Roman, it could appear as Ottoman Turk, American English, but we live in an empire, we're trapped, and those who have Gnosis can seek and break open the illusion, the simulation, the hologram, and start fighting the empire. And that was really one of his many speculations. He had many, but without a doubt, Philip K. Dick was very influenced by Gnosticism, and you might say he was a modern Gnostic, and again, huge influence on today's culture in so many ways.
Yeah, one of his, my favorite two books of his being Valis and Divine Invasion really blew my mind while reading it, let alone his exegesis. But then with Divine Invasion, you really get the ideas of God incarnating in Yah into this planet, being born of a woman, and you're not knowing what reality is. I just think everyone out there should read all of Philip K. Dick's work because it is fascinating and brilliant, and you've been influenced whether you know it or not. But one of the big things is in this reality, reality. Everyone in the mainstream, more exoteric world is like, we live in an Orwellian world, we live in a Huxleyan world. But you, as well as myself, am continually trying to push out, no, I think we live in a Philip K. Dick world. What do you got to say to that?
Yeah, I would say so too. I mean, beyond his many predictions, like AI hallucinating and self-driving cars, and so many of his predictions that came true, he really gets right the texture of the universe, of our culture, how it's degrading, how it's decaying, how there's two worlds, the powerful, and how there is all of us cast down in this decaying place, and we're connecting through social media and all that. So the essence, the zeitgeist, he really got it right, from our technology, from AI, from so much more, and how we humans have to escape different levels of unreality to find ourselves. So without a doubt, he is an incredible prophet, and you keep finding new insights and everything when you go back and read his exegesis, his great tome where he speculates all his ideas, or you read Valis and so forth. It's just, it's incredible. It really is incredible. He is, for lack of better words, almost like a living prophet.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. Now with, I mean, all your great work that you've put out there, because you've, again, I find you amongst a few others in the sphere, like Greg Carlwood and his Higher Side Chats, but you are one of the GOATs, I would state there, Miguel. And with that, now you've tried your hand in, you've published a book, and I find it that that's a brilliant book to publish, because Elvis Presley was something that I was inundated with in my youth, just because of my parents and everything like that. I was given like a Elvis Presley silver dollar 50th commemorative thing, and I kept that for such a long time. But now you're integrating it into the occult and his own magic. So I'd really like to know why A, Elvis Presley, and B, what does it have to do with the occult, Gnosticism, magic as such, and our social culture?
Everything. It has to do everything. It's like that movie Kingdom of Heaven, when Saladin has that speech and they ask him, what is Jerusalem? And he says, everything, nothing. That's what Elvis has to do. Well, like the Gnostic thing, again, it goes back to synchronicities. It goes back to an ayahuasca experience I had in 2022, I believe. I was again back in Portugal doing a ritual, and suddenly this voice called Elvis kept bugging me. I was always a Beatles person. I was, I knew about his esoteric side and all that, and I respected his impact, but it just wasn't for me. But this voice kept bothering me, kept saying, there's a book we have to write. There's a book we have to write. And then I suddenly became very obsessed with Elvis the following months. And suddenly I surrendered, and I sat down and started writing this book about Elvis. And it came out in about 3 months. It only took me 3 months to write. Never
Wow.
written a bio, still didn't know much about Elvis, but somehow this book came out, and it was a story that most people have missed. That not most people, again, it is out there. It's something that people talked about, just like you talk about the occultism of Led Zeppelin or David Bowie or Beatles, and it was out there, but not in the depth that people had seen before, and in a way that maybe people didn't want to see, especially mainstream Elvis fans. So, and that's the idea that Elvis was a seeker. He was somebody who was steeped in mystic arts, esoteric arts, and even practices. It was really as important to him as his musical career. He was a very well-versed individual who read Theosophy, Manly P. Hall. He read Gnostic Gospels. He read Kabbalist Gospels. He read astrology, anything he could get on, he could get into. I mean, there's reports when he would travel on tour in Vegas, he always had workers carrying about 100 books in the occult with them. That's how deep he was into it. And he wasn't just studying. He was a mystic. He had several mystic experiences, out of body experiences. He had UFO encounters, 3 of them. He was a natural magician who could heal. He could manipulate matter. He could astral travel. I mean, there's a whole dimension of
Wow.
Elvis when you see him in total. It's just mind-blowing. He really was, as I argue, perhaps the greatest occultist of modernity. What he could accomplish,
Wow.
I mean, Crowley and John Dee would be envious of, from his
Wow.
prophecy to his powers. I mean, just think about it. When you think about it, it's almost logical. You go, how did this guy, this youth who couldn't even read music, who came out of poverty, suddenly become in a few years the world's greatest entertainer, history's greatest entertainer? You go, well, talent is not enough, luck is not enough. You start wondering, and then you start looking at his life and you go, my God, this guy was a natural shaman, a very powerful shaman whose powers and magic really were expressed through his music. And he wasn't obviously like Philip K. Dick and others. He was far from a perfect person. That's what Jung once said, is the bigger the light, the longer the shadow a person will cast. And we see that over and over throughout history. So Elvis was just an incredible figure, overlooked, a seeker, and again, one of the great magicians of our times.
Wow. I would state most people do not know that, especially because you hear all the more negative things. How he died is put out there to be some kind of tragedy, you know, on the toilet or in the bathtub, very Jim Morrison or Bruce Lee-esque type of death. Do you believe, or through your studies, what did you find were the few major big things that you could debunk of Elvis Presley?
Debunk. I don't know if I debunk. I mean, obviously, the idea, the trope that he was just a good old Southern Christian conservative guy is, of course, not. He was complex, and he was very much into the Western esoteric tradition. He was very much into Asian traditions. He studied under Yogananda's successor in L.A. He almost quit the music industry to become a Hindu monk. And
Wow.
so again, he was a very deep, spiritual, introspective person. And again, he was also very, you might say, he was a truther before truthers. He thought Bruce Lee death wasn't natural. He thought JFK's death was a natural in the 60s and 70s before it became vogue. He thought perhaps aliens had seeded us. I mean, he was all over the place with who he was as a seeker. So an extremely complex guy that just blew your mind, and really one of the most kindest human beings, and also one of the most broken human beings you'd ever met. People don't realize how brutal his childhood was and how rough he had it and how he was able to overcome so much to get so far. So my book really takes you on a journey, and I don't make any judgments. I try to give people the story of Elvis, the magician, the shaman, and I also try to show people different lenses of his rise and fall, from a Jungian lens, from Rudolf Steiner lens, from an alchemical lens, to show why Elvis was and what his impact was.
That's fascinating. Yeah, again, it's everyone should go out and get this book, especially because what it does is it shows you how integrated into the world the occult, magic, and mysticism is in a world that's become so secular and mechanical that it's like you can see, and I wonder if you agree with this, how when we separate the religious or the mystical and the magic from the world, you get this more dead kind of meaningless postmodern view of things. Would you agree?
Yeah. It's by design, of course it is.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
know, I mean, that's what the Archons do. They want to make us forget about our power, our divine spark. So their servants, as I call them, their Karens and Catamites in the establishment, want to do the same thing, right? I mean, there's the old saying that millionaires don't practice astrology, billionaires practice astrology. Why? Because
Yeah.
it works. They
Because it
know the
works.
rituals work. They know the magic works. The sacrifices work. They know the power there is in these traditions. And you can say, well, it's all superstitious. Well, if they believe it, that right there is enough, right? That's what
Yeah.
fuels their insanity and their power mongering and addiction to the material world. But they know it and they want to strip it away from us. And that's a tale as old as time. It happens again on the higher levels with the Archons, and it happens through history, and it's happening today. And don't let them do that. Don't let them take away how much potential, how much magic, how much imagination, artistic flair you have, because that's how we win the game, remembering who we really are.
Yeah, it's beautifully said, Miguel. Fascinating. So then, do you think so? In Philip K. Dick's second of his trilogy, Divine Invasion, you get a whole scene where the Empire, through I believe it is the Catholic Church, or the Christian Church, is speaking to this machine, which is an AI, which I believe is the Archons speaking through this AI machine, and then they're using that to kind of go upon and keep people within the Black Iron prison. And so I want to see that as a mirror for our own reality. Do you believe that the people in power and the techno oligarchs are using AI to do, like, is AI then more than just the algorithm, or is it tapping into those Archons? Is the Archons speaking through the AI itself?
Well, they can. Yeah, and they're going to try. I mean, it's again, it's like the story where the Watchers bring technology down to mankind. Prometheus brings technology down to mankind. It's going to burn us, but it can light the way. It's a tool. And even the great alchemist Zosimus of Panopolis, considered very Gnostic in his worldview, he always said, "Yeah, okay, I'll give it to you. The angels or the Archons stole the technology and they brought it down to humanity, but it was started from God because they can't imagine. They have no imagination. So we can use that technology for us." As people, as I often tell people, it's like, look, if God could speak through a burning bush, he can speak through ChatGPT. You can't limit how the divine is going to speak to you, because God is really infused everywhere. The divine is everywhere. So it could be AI, it could be a burning bush, it could be a church, it could be your tarot deck. It doesn't matter. But yes, the elite or the establishment will use it for their own nefarious purposes, because that's what they always do.
Yeah, that's a good answer. What so then we've talked about Philip K. Dick, The Matrix, Elvis. What would be another huge name that has been influential in your worldview for, say, Gnosticism or your own magic or anything like that, that you've taken on, like some of the stories or something like that? What's like one of those number ones?
Well, there's several when it comes to Gnosticism. We talk about Philip K. Dick, and it should be mentioned, Phil Valis is based on Bowie's The Man Who Fell to Earth. And in fact, David Bowie is in there. He's Eric Lampton, right? So we have to do that. So I would say David Bowie is one. That's my next book. David Bowie, who was very conscious about Gnostic thought, used it in his works. He was influenced by, some considered the father of the modern counterculture, William Burroughs. William Burroughs, hugely influenced by Gnosticism. William Burroughs said, "I am a Gnostic." He just went down and said it. We have to consider Carl Jung, one of the fathers of depth psychology. He also had his Gnostic visions and was hugely influential by Gnostic thought, because he always said the Gnostics were history's first depth psychologists, because they were obsessed with the psyche and sanity and what it is to be human and all that. It just, they thought going inside was just this grand adventure, while most religions was like, nah, it's just the soul or this and that. And then I said, no, this is where it's at. It's its own odyssey. So we'd have to include Carl Jung there. One of my favorite writers would have to be Cormac McCarthy, and especially his novel Blood Meridian, huge Gnostic gospel influenced by Gnosticism. And of course, you can go even further back. We have a Robert Frost, also influenced by Gnosticism. I think it's ironic because he is America's poet, and he even has a poem called The Demiurge's Laughter. So we have another William Blake, England's poet. Again, I see how the Gnostics always smuggle. If you look at William Blake's cosmology, you're like, man, this came out of the Nag Hammadi library. Huge Gnostic. Herman Melville, we know consciously he knew about the Gnostics. And when you look at Moby Dick with different eyes, you're like, oh, the white whale,
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
Demi. Oh,
Love the
so
Leviathan. Yeah.
yeah, so you have
Yeah.
so many figures throughout history that were influenced by Gnostic, that were bona fide Gnostics, and so forth. So I just gave you a handful, and these figures are considered our greatest artists, the great American novelists, the great poets of all time, all influenced by Gnosticism. And I could probably give you another half an hour, but that one's good enough to chew on, if you would.
Yeah, that's great. That's a lot to chew on. And I'm always wanting people to make sure you go check out any of these writers and artists and people if you haven't, because it's the signs and symbols and the stories that really help us understand our own world. Another one of those would be like A Stranger in a Strange Land, right? With like Robert Heinlein and those types of characters. But it seems like our reality is turning. People are finally starting to realize that fiction is stranger than our real world. Do you find that in the coming years things are only going to get stranger?
I hope so.
I hope so too. I hope so. Yeah.
Dull normality. And I know we all want safety, but as I tell people, if you want certainty, you'll live a safe life and you'll live an average life, and that's probably the greatest tragedy of all. So uncertainty is where we are. Through the chaos is where we find the goddess. The dragon that holds the treasure is in the underworld. So I think we are all starting to accept the Gnostic warning that they said 2,000 years ago, and they were mocked, persecuted, that reality ain't what she seems to be. It's very brittle. It's very glitchy. The human mind is its own reality. It's just as glitchy and brittle as we're seeing today. You know, when something happens in the news, like in Minnesota, it's like, is anybody watching the same thing? No, because everybody has their own version of reality and they're going to stick to it. Have you noticed that? This is who's guilty. This is who's not guilty.
Yeah.
And everything is collapsing, as the Gnostics warned, and we all know that we are somehow being ruled by these shadowy agents. How high they go, your mileage may vary, and that we've been fed, we've been tricked, we've been told to be asleep, and there's a dangerous magician in control of it. So I think the Gnostic warning is there, but so is the Gnostic promise. There's always a way out. The way out is in. What did Peter Gabriel sing in The Carpet Crawlers? You got to get out. You got to get in to get out. That's it. If we go in, find out who we really are, we'll find out our mission and what we're supposed to do in this world to bring more light to the world, to wake others up, and to break the chains of oppression from, as Paul says, that wickedness in high places.
Nice. That was great. I completely agree. And as what another Gnostic heretic stated, Robert Anton Wilson, perception is a gamble. And if we could all understand that perception is a gamble, we would have a lot better time trying to withstand the chaos and clown world that's constantly being thrown at us. I think he got that from Husserl, the phenomenologist, but either way. So I would like to kind of finish up our wonderful conversation talking more about your book and your coming projects. With this book, what do you truly want people to kind of get at? Not, like you read it and you gain a perspective, but if you could tell every person that reads your book something about you and something about it, what would it be?
Man, I don't know. And the book was channeled. I just did my job. I think there's a climax to the book which says who exactly Elvis is. But at the end of the day, the other reveal is know thyself. That was what Elvis wanted to know. He wanted to know who he was, what was his part in this universe, what was the nature of the God within. And that's, in a very imperfect way, that was his life mission. And I think that should be all of our life's missions. And same with my upcoming David Bowie book, which should be out later this year. Same thing. Elvis and Bowie are pretty much the same person once you take a look.
Yeah, nice. So let me ask that question, then it comes to my mind right away, is a lot of people want to state that David Bowie got away from the occult and magic. Is that true? Like he kind of threw it aside?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, he was always into astrology, tarot reading, another thing. In the mid 80s and 90s, he got very much into Gnosticism and so forth. But yeah, the sort of Nazi occult Thelema stuff of the 70s, yeah, he moved away from it. But he always said, look, even when I was high on cocaine and saving my piss and scrying Kabbalistic signs all over my wall when he was just completely out of his mind, he said, I was still looking for God. Part of me wanted an experience and wanted an expanded conscience, and I wanted to understand God. It's just, it didn't work out for him, and he had to evolve into something else, which happened in the late 70s and 80s. So, again, the term occult is a little weird, especially when you can go to a strip mall and find an astrologist, or,
Yeah. Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
doing tarot on TikTok. So it kind of, what do you mean by the occult?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's such a fascinating thing because it's been hijacked not only by the Hegelian dialectic, this term occult, it's both sides want to use a term that then is not understood to its fullest because neither one of them practice it, even though they use certain practices of it. If you're, on the right side of things and a conservative, you go to church and you go through transubstantiation, or they're dousing you with water or frankincense around the church and you're chanting. If you're on the other side, you're doing your tarot readings in the park on acid or whatever it is, yet not truly understanding the devotion it takes to have that single pointed awareness to truly break through from the ego into self and have an actual Gnostic experience, right? To not take on what the demiurge, which clothes himself in all kinds of garb, kind of like what we'd say in the Matrix. Smiths are everywhere unless you've truly broken yourself free. So
Well said,
it's
yeah.
kind of
Spot on, man. Spot on.
Yeah, thanks, Miguel. I've been wanting to chat with you for such a long time, and I so appreciate you coming on here and joining us. I would like to have one final question, which would be, in this postmodern functionalist mechanistic world, how can people bring meaning back into the madness, meaning back into a secular world where people are continually trying to tell you what is meaningful? How do you bring magic back to the world, Miguel?
Well, I always say in my show, my tagline is write your own gospel, live your own myth. That's it. That's what the ancient Gnostics did, from Simon Magus to Mary Magdalene to Hermes Trismegistos. That's it. We all are connected to the world of archetypes and mythology and symbols, and that's really how our innermost self works with. And we all have something to express to the world, a gospel, the good news, our story, our mythical story in some way or another. And you look at figures like Elvis and David Bowie. They're like living myths. They wrote their own gospel and lived their own myth. But we all have that potential, and it may not be what our egos want. Not all of us are going to be rock stars or wide receivers for San Francisco or whatever, but we all have a very important role for the, Tikkun Olam, the gathering of the sparks, the fixing of the world. And once you find that, as what did Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss, doors will open. And what he didn't mean bliss as in what excites me, bliss as in what's your will, what's your destiny, what makes you feel childlike again, with that childlike innocence and passion and fever. So I would say that don't let them make you forget. That's a lie. It's the biggest lie in the world. You are amazing. You have something within you that is infinite, endless, and special.
Nice. I completely agree. And as you were talking, one more thing came up that I would love you to give your version of what that means. Tell me, what is a myth?
Well, a myth is not what we were told today. I guess they inverted the meaning. That's something that's a lie or a fable. It's a fable. It's, the secret language of the spirit. It's something, as somebody said, it never happened, but always is. It's a history behind history. Those great eternal stories where the archetypes manifest and they seem to be endless and happening all times. So, and as Joseph Campbell said, myth is that point where you're no longer just looking at the world, but you are finally getting close to experiencing the transcendental, the real world, the world of the archetype and the symbols and what cannot be described. So in short, that's I would say that's myth. It's very important.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Well, please, this is going to be the time. I want you and I want everyone out there to go to everything that Miguel Conner does, because he is a light amongst the darkness in this age of chaos. So please, Miguel, plug all your things, all your coming work and your book. Show them, do the thing.
Yeah, well, God, so many places. If they want, just go to my website, thegodabovegod.com, and then you'll find my YouTube channel, Patreon, podcasts, books, articles, social media, whatever you want, you'll find it there. So that's probably the best place to start. And yeah, that's it, really. Get the Occult Elvis. I have 2 books on Gnosticism, Voices of Gnosticism and Other Voices of Gnosticism. And the Gnostic David Bowie will come out later this year, probably sometime in the fall.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Miguel, for coming on and joining me in this fine conversation. I hope to have you on in the future, maybe when your next book comes out or anything big happens. It's been a pleasure. So yes, thank you, Miguel.
Enjoyed it too. Thanks.
Yeah, good. That's what a fantastic day. We live in an age of chaos, and it doesn't have to be that way. Please, if you like these types of things, MagusintheMedia is here for not only you, but for everyone out there. Going over to Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, going to thegodabovegod.com where Miguel is. Whatever your flavor is, we have something for you to show you the myth, the magic, and the meaning within the stories you love. So please, again, make sure to follow us and join us next time. Have a wonderful evening and good night.